Fake HOA called him aggressive. He was helping evacuate the elderly. The sky above Pinewood Hills was thick with smoke, the air crackling with tension and heat. A wildfire sparked by a lightning storm the night before had spread faster than anyone could have predicted. The evacuation order came swiftly. Sirens wailed, helicopters circled, neighbors scrambled to pack what they could. Trey Wilson wasn't running, he was knocking on doors. A former Army medic and now a trained disaster response volunteer, Trey had lived in the neighborhood less than a year. Tall, broad-shouldered, with deep brown skin and a calm, commanding voice, Trey knew exactly what to do when chaos broke loose. He wore his tactical vest with his volunteer badge clearly visible and moved with urgency, not panic, rushing between homes, helping elderly residents who couldn't move fast on their own. One by one, he lifted them into waiting vans and community shuttles, checked on medications, and reassured frightened seniors through smoke-choked coughs. But Karen Whitfield didn't see any of that. Peering through her spotless living room window, clutching a glass of white wine, Karen narrowed her eyes. She had long considered herself the unofficial head of the neighborhood, a self-appointed president of the now-defunct HOA. She didn't care that the HOA had legally dissolved years ago. In her mind, someone still had to protect the standards of Pinewood Hills. And Trey? He didn't look like her idea of a rescuer. He looked like a threat. Within minutes, she was outside on the curb, arms crossed, phone already recording. "I don't care what badge you think you have," she snapped as Trey emerged from a nearby house carrying an old man in his arms. "You're being aggressive. You're scaring people." Trey paused, his face streaked with soot, his hands gripping the man securely. "Ma'am," he said, voice calm but clipped. "This man couldn't walk. His family isn't home. There's no time. You're not authorized to be here." "This isn't your jurisdiction," Karen shouted, still filming. The old man in Trey's arms stirred weakly. "He's helping me." Karen didn't care. She called 911. "I have a large black man in tactical gear," she told dispatch. "He's acting aggressively. I think he's impersonating emergency personnel." Those words, caught on a neighbor's doorbell camera, would be played back across the country within 24 hours. By the time the real police arrived, Trey had already helped 7 elderly residents get to safety. The responding officer recognized him immediately. "Wilson, from Search and Rescue. We've been looking for you. We need help coordinating in Zone 3. Trey nodded and walked off. Karen stood speechless on the sidewalk, still holding her phone, now trembling in her hand. But someone else had been watching. Jasmine Liu, a 16-year-old neighbor and aspiring journalist. She posted the doorbell footage online with a caption, "This man was saving our elders." She called the cops on him. The video exploded. Within hours, national news picked it up. Interviews, hashtags, and outrage flooded social media. The phrase, "he's helping me," trended globally. Commenters were furious. "This is what racism looks like. She endangered lives with her ignorance. We need more Treys. We need fewer Karens." Karen's identity was quickly revealed. Her attempt to protect the neighborhood had made her infamous instead. She received hundreds of angry messages, calls, even death threats. Her Facebook profile was flooded with angry emojis and quotes from the video. She shut down all her accounts, stayed inside, and for the first time in her life, felt what it was like to be on the receiving end of judgment. The wildfire was eventually contained. No lives were lost in Pinewood Hills, thanks in part to Trey's fast action. The mayor publicly commended his work, and the state awarded him a medal for civilian bravery. When asked about Karen's actions, Trey simply said, "I wasn't there for her approval. I was there to serve. If she's willing to learn, I'm still willing to teach." And that stuck with Karen. She watched his interview in silence, sitting alone on her couch in the same pristine living room where she had first judged him. For the first time in her life, she realized how small her world had been. How many assumptions she had wrapped in politeness and passed off as concern. The next time she saw Trey was at a neighborhood memorial event for the fire. Her steps were hesitant, her voice quiet. "I misjudged you," she said, hands slightly trembling. "I don't expect you to forgive me, but I need you to know, I see it now. I see you now." Trey studied her for a moment, then gently he nodded. "That's a start." The memorial event was simple. Folding chairs set up at the local park, Rows of candles and framed photos of homes saved and elders rescued. It was more than just a tribute to the fire response. It was a moment for the neighborhood to reflect on what had burned and what had been revealed. Trey stood quietly at the back, not seeking attention. He wasn't in uniform this time, just jeans and a hoodie, chatting with some of the seniors he'd helped. They smiled at him like he was family now. Karen hovered near the edge of the crowd. She hadn't been invited, but she had come anyway, clutching a small manila envelope. After their brief conversation earlier that week, she had stayed up 3 nights straight, watching videos, reading articles on racial bias, and writing a letter she still wasn't sure Trey would ever read. She hadn't just been wrong, she had been dangerous. And while the internet had already passed judgment, she hadn't yet faced the person she'd harmed most. She approached slowly. "Trey," she said softly, "may I speak with you?" He turned. A few people glanced over. The air went quiet. Karen handed him the envelope. "It's everything. A letter, a donation to the Emergency Response Center, and a signed affidavit admitting I lied when I said you were acting aggressively." Trey didn't take it right away. She added, "You were carrying Mr. Elkins when I stopped you. I've spoken to his family. I apologized to them too. I wanted you to know." Trey finally accepted the envelope. "You didn't just stop me," he said evenly. "You delayed an evacuation. That man could have died." Karen's voice broke. "I know." A long pause stretched between them. Then Trey glanced around. "You didn't come here to save face." "No," Karen said. "I came here to start over." He looked at her, not the woman who once shouted from the sidewalk, but the one who now stood with shaking hands and honest eyes. "You'll have to earn their trust," he said, nodding toward the crowd. "But you've taken the first step." In the days that followed, Karen did more than apologize. She took action. She volunteered at the senior center. She joined community workshops on race, bias, and neighborhood equity. She gave up her fake HOA role and helped organize a real, inclusive council, with Trey's help. Some residents were skeptical. Others were angry. But as weeks turned into months, they began to see the change wasn't just for show. One morning, she knocked on Trey's door. "I signed up to take the state's Community Emergency Response Team training," she said. "You were right. The next time something happens, I want to be someone who helps." Trey smiled, truly smiled. "You'll be good at it," he said. "And don't worry, I'll be tough on you during drills." The local news ran a follow-up story 6 months later. The headline read, "From Conflict to Connection, Pinewood Hills rebuilds in more ways than one." It showed Karen and Trey side by side, helping lead a neighborhood safety drill. Karen in her new CERT vest. Trey directing logistics. The once divided community now working together. A young boy in the crowd asked, "Is that the guy who saved everyone?" His mom nodded. "Yes, and that's the woman who almost got in the way, but decided to help instead." The boy paused. "So, she changed?" The mom replied, "Sometimes people don't change until they're shown how." That evening, as the sun dipped low over Pinewood Hills, Trey walked the quiet sidewalks past houses now safer, stronger, and more united. A folded piece of paper sat in his pocket, Karen's handwritten letter. In it, one line stood out. "What I saw that day wasn't aggression, it was courage. And what I mistook for threat was actually protection. Thank you for showing me the difference." He stood at the top of a small hill overlooking the homes he had once raced between, carrying strangers on his back. Now he carried something else, proof that even the deepest prejudice can crack open under the weight of truth. And when it does, what blooms in its place might just be something brighter than fire: honor, humanity, and hope. Side story. A year had passed since the wildfire turned Pinewood Hills upside down. The houses had been repaired, fences repainted, and lawns replanted. But the biggest change wasn't what people saw, it was what they felt. At the edge of the neighborhood sat a small, once vacant lot. It had been ignored for years, overgrown, forgotten. But now, under the warm spring sun, it was alive with color. Rows of tulips, sunflowers, and herbs danced in the breeze. In the center stood a wooden sign hand-carved by local teens. "The Unity Garden, built by all for all." Trey stood with gloved hands, gently placing a new rosemary plant into the soil. Across from him, Karen crouched beside a flower bed, her hands dirty, her sleeves rolled up, a straw hat shading her now familiar smile. You never told me you had a green thumb, Trey joked. Karen chuckled. You never told me planting could feel like healing. The garden had been her idea, but only because she had listened. After months of showing up, quietly, consistently, she'd asked Trey how the community could come together again, not just in meetings, but in spirit. This place needs something that grows, he had said, not just from the ground, but from the heart. And so they built it, together. At first, few came, but week by week, more neighbors stopped by. Some brought seeds, others brought stories. One brought a bench carved with the names of those who'd been rescued. Children painted rocks with messages like, "Thank you, Trey," and "We see you." Even Mr. Elkins, the elderly man Trey carried that day, now came each Saturday in his wheelchair, handing out lemonade and telling jokes with a sparkle in his eye. One afternoon, a young girl named Amara walked up to Trey. She held out a drawing, a big man in a vest carrying someone through smoke, with a red heart above him. "That's you," she said proudly. Trey blinked hard and crouched to meet her gaze. "You made this for me?" Amara nodded. "Mom said you were brave when others were scared. I want to be like that." Trey looked over at Karen, who watched silently from behind a blooming hydrangea bush, eyes glassy. He smiled and said to the little girl, "Then always choose to help, even when someone misunderstands you. That's what makes you strong." The sun dipped low, casting golden light over the garden. From the sidewalk, a group of neighbors, once divided, now laughed, shared recipes, and passed around a basket of fresh basil. It wasn't just a garden, it was proof that people could grow again, that wounds could turn into roots, and that even the hardest hearts could bloom when watered by truth, humility, and hope. The end.